Welcome to the WASCOP Selective Traffic Overtime Enforcement Grant Program video tutorial. At the conclusion of this tutorial, you should be able to understand the ground rules for applying for grant funding. You should be able to also understand the specific application requirements for grant funding, and you should be able to understand the process for applying for grant funding from WASCOP. Finally, you will be introduced to additional resources. Without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Bade with the University of Wyoming Police Department. This tutorial is designed to assist you with navigating the grant application process for the Selective Traffic Overtime Enforcement Grant Program. This program is administered by the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. Let's start with a review of the ground rules for the application process.
Selective traffic enforcement grants are available to law enforcement agencies throughout the state to provide for enhanced overtime traffic enforcement activities. This grant strategy is a proven countermeasure for reducing traffic injuries and deaths. These grants are designed to target safety priorities both locally and statewide. The enforcement priorities have been identified as 1. Increasing seatbelt and child restraint usage or occupant protection, 2. Decreasing impaired driving, and 3. Reducing speed-related crashes. These enforcement priorities have also been proven to be effective in reducing the rising number of motorcycle crashes, injuries, and deaths.
Now that we've covered the ground rules, let's take a look at the requirements of the grant application documents.
The first step in the process is to review the grant requirements and objectives on Form HS2 to decide whether your agency is willing and able to abide by the requirements for all grant recipients. This document provides detailed information about the grant requirements and the agency commitments and objectives. Each grant is event-based and identifies a specific traffic enforcement focus. Participation in the following 3 national events is required of all grant recipients. The first event is the December Holiday Crackdown, which targets DUI enforcement. The second event is the May Mobilization, which targets occupant protection enforcement. And the third event, the August National Crackdown, targets DUI enforcement. The specific dates involved are provided in the application form. Agencies may also select calendar events and/or local events specific to their community needs. Selecting appropriate events at the beginning of this project allows for better planning of targeted enforcement activities and more effective media release and placement. Additional information on the process for applying for funding for local events is provided later in this tutorial. All the application forms are in Excel format. Please fill the required forms out in their entirety in order to avoid delays in processing your application.
Now that you understand the ground rules of the application process and the document requirements, let's work through an example.
The first step in completing the application form is to determine how much money is available for your agency in both alcohol enforcement and for occupant protection enforcement. For this example, we'll say that we're Lusk Police Department. I've opened the Highway Safety Grants Alcohol Department allocations. As you can see, the form is separated by county, with each county being listed alphabetically. Since Lusk is in Niobrara County, we'll look specifically at the Lusk Police Department, and we see that there is $2,771.98 available for alcohol enforcement. If we look at the HVE Occupant Protection Enforcement document, we can also go down and we see that there is $2,000 available for Lusk Police Department for occupant protection HVE enforcement. Once you have the allocation formula numbers, you can then begin filling out the actual grant application. The application is the HS1 form, and you need to make sure that you put your agency name in the agency requesting funds line. You can then transfer the numbers that you pulled from the allocation formula into the budget at the bottom of the first section of the form. As you may recall, the DUI event budget for Lusk Police Department was $2,771.98. The overtime enforcement budget for the occupant protection was $2,000. Once these numbers are entered, we can then come up and start figuring out where we're going to allocate this funding. As you can recall, there are 3 national events that are required to be worked. These events are highlighted in red text on the form: the National 5, Holiday Season Impaired Driving, the National 9, May Mobilization, Occupant Protection, and the National 11, National Crackdown, Impaired Driving. Let's say, for the sake of this example, that we're going to work $500 worth of overtime enforcement for the holiday crackdown. Since this is DUI, we'll put that in the DUI column. In the May mobilization for occupant protection, we'll say that we're going to work $1,000 of occupant protection overtime during May mobilization, and this will be put in the OP overtime column. Finally, we have the required national crackdown for impaired driving for the August crackdown, and let's say we're going to work another $500 of DUI overtime during this time period. You can also see, as I start putting these numbers in, it automatically totals how much we have available to work. So far, we've not exceeded the numbers for DUI or occupant protection, so we can start picking some other areas that we want to work. Let's say that we also want to work a couple of DUI events to include the buzzed driving, impaired driving, for $500, and the pre-holiday impaired driving for $500. This still leaves us with approximately $771 left. So let's say that we're going to work Super Bowl for another $500, leaving us with $271.98 left. And let's say that we'll put all that in impaired driving for St. Patrick's Day. This leaves us with our total of $2,771.98, which matches the overtime budget that was taken from the allocation form. Let's do the same thing for the remaining occupant protection funding. For this example, let's say that we want to work an additional $500 of occupant protection overtime during the National 1 event, National Teen Driver Week. We can then come down and say that we'll work another $500 of overtime during the Thanksgiving occupant protection. As you can see, this has also totaled up the $2,000, which matches the occupant protection event budget that we had available. Once the amounts that you've placed in the columns match with the amount available, you're done with the initial part of the document. We'll cover additional funding requests in just a moment, but make sure that the bottom section is filled out with the agency head's signature, the project director, and phone numbers and emails for both the agency head and the project director. The project director will be the person responsible for submitting the reporting forms when the events are completed, and serve as a primary contact for WASCOP when they need to contact someone in your agency regarding questions about the grant.
Additional funding has been allocated for local events. Let's go over the process for applying for funding for these events.
The process for requesting funding for overtime to work local events is relatively straightforward. As you can see on the regular form, there are up to 12 local events listed on the form. For the sake of this example, we'll just pick one local event, and we'll say that this local event starts directly after the 4th of July impaired driving campaign. So our event is going to start July 6th and will run through July 13th. We'll call this our local festival. And for the sake of this example, we'll say that the problems that we've had with this local festival in the past have been primarily related to impaired driving, so we'll list this as a DUI event. We're also going to request $1,000 to work for overtime. As you can see, the $1,000 has now totaled with the $2,771.98 from below. It's important to come down to the green section which lists additional funding request. And since we're requesting additional funding for DUI, we need to put that $1,000 in the overtime enforcement budget request. Once that is listed, we have to provide a written narrative summary and attach it to the application for the events or the problem we're requesting additional funding for, and include relative information to justify the request. This relative information can be crash data, arrest data from prior events, or other types of relevant data. Information and examples for each category for additional funding is available on the Grants Network site. The file is labeled Additional Funding Request Guide. Once you have completed the HS1 grant application form and made sure that the agency head and the project director have both signed the form, you can then upload your completed Excel application form to your agency project management site on the WASCOP Highway Safety Grants Network website shown here.
Hopefully you now understand the basic process for applying for grant funding for the Selective Traffic Overtime Enforcement Grant Program through WASCOP.
If you have any questions about the grant application process, feel free to contact WASCOP Grant Administrator Lori Emmert or WASCOP Project Manager Ernie Johnson at the email address or phone numbers listed below.
Additional funding has been allocated for equipment. There are unique requirements for applying for this funding. In addition, we have developed another tutorial to assist you with submitting the proper paperwork for reporting and reimbursement. Links to these resources are provided here and here.